We have 6?
We currently have 6.
Okay.
Right?
Just,
Thanks. We're thinking we should put it in the survey.
what's that?
I think it's a 7.
Metro. Yeah, I was like, come on in. You're gonna be quorum.
I think that might be incentive to complete the survey.
You're quorum. It might be just like this. Oh, did that shut up? Okay. So we got. What do we have? So we have that and Christina online. So we're at 7?
We're at 7.
Right. 4 o'clock on the dot. For folks online, we're waiting hopefully to hit quorum, so we'll get started in just a few minutes. Mindy, when we do intros, you mind saying a couple extra words about yourself? Thanks.
Can you promote the game or make me co-host?
Well, you know, it's not, they might be paying their parking.
That makes seem so easy.
Yeah, I know.
Can you ask, because now they're watching, can you ask for them to be on the screen?
Can our tech folks shift the screen so we can get the online participants visible, please? Perfect. Welcome, Chair. Welcome, Christina. Hello, Yvette. Welcome. I think we have quorum now, but I think we're at quorum, but we'll give a couple more seconds for any other folks to join. Might just because it's a sunny day, you know, people don't want to be inside. Who knows?
Yeah, the flames. Famous.
Welcome, Ebony. Yeah, it is good.
Ebony, it's Catherine. I like the
Oh,
paint on your wall. Oops, you're muted. Oops, she's talking to somebody else. Yep. Yeah,
maybe.
pink. Can you tell? It's one of my favorite colors.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's okay over here.
Ebony, if you're talking to us, you're on mute. She's talking to someone that's giving her more joy than maybe talking to us, looks like.
Multiple telephone conversations with staff. I'm sorry. I didn't hear
No,
anything that you guys have said for the past several seconds.
That's okay, we're just talking about you. Hey, Jess.
Yes.
I think so.
That's right.
Somebody's hot spot out in the street.
You're good at that.
It's all public record anyway, right?
That's true. All right, so we should give one more minute and then we'll get going. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Is that, are there more people online that we're just not seeing? Okay.
But we have quorum.
Yes.
Okay, let me just, just let me get organized. That's Zoe up there
Yep, so.
and Vahid.
You should have waited for the right moment to make a statement of that. Maybe.
I was just feeling really grateful that I chose to do it.
Well, why don't we kick it off? We're at 4:04, so meeting commencing. Welcome to, is it the 7th meeting, or we've had 7 meetings?
I think it's the 7th business meeting.
7th is lucky meeting number 7. So I won't belabor the welcoming.
Recording in progress.
Recording in progress. We are going to start. I'm going to have my colleague Ariella read the safety script, and then we'll work through some of our openings and dive into our substance.
Great. For those in the room, please note that we are on the 3rd floor of the building. And in the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit out the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk. We will meet in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify staff at the front desk. And the nearest AED machine is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. And a fire extinguisher is located in the corridor along the side of the hall just behind the wall.
Was that it? Okay, great, thank you. Well, let's dive in. We'll start with introductions. If it's okay, we'll start with folks online. I'll call you off if you could just introduce yourself. So let's start with Yvette.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yvette Hernandez, and I'm here. I'm not here with Home Forward. I'm so sorry. I just lost track. Excuse me.
Great, thank you. It's complicated remembering who you are, right? Zoe.
Hi, everybody. Soy La Copiano, Community Action, Washington County.
Thank you. Our co-chair, Ebony.
Good afternoon, all. Ebony Brown, she, her pronouns, Executive Director of Greater Good Northwest.
Great, thank you. Christina.
Cristina Palacios, she, her pronouns, and I'm here as a community member.
Thank you. Mercedes.
Hello, everybody. Mercedes Elizalde, she and her pronouns. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Latino Network.
And then I saw Jess.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Jess Larson. I use she and her pronouns, and I get to work in the Washington County Department team. Nice to see you all.
Great, thank you. Jesse.
Hey, everybody. Jesse Adams, Washington County Homo Services team.
I thought I saw Chair Smith at one point.
Yes, Tootie Smith, Chair, Clackamas County Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Did I miss any members online? Okay, let's go in the room. There's going to be a bunch of M's in a row. Matt, co-chair.
Yeah, Matt Chapman, actually retired, he is, and happy to be here.
Thank you.
The person is awesome. Oops. Did that come through enough?
Let's do it again, just for the record.
Hi, Matt Chapman, co-chair, he, his, retired, but not doing that very well, and not even as well as I manage microphones.
Great, and a good reminder for microphones, if you click it, the red light turns on when it's hot. You can turn it off. It's hard to see, but you can always give a little tap if you need to. But on, if you could turn it off when you're not speaking, or at least raise it away from you, that would be helpful. Let's go, Monta.
Hello, everybody. Monta Knutson, he, him pronouns. I'm the Executive Director over at Bridges to Change.
Great, thank you. Mike?
Mike Liu at Fubon Shopping Center. I'm on the executive board of the Portland Business Alliance as well.
Great, thank you. Chair Harrington?
Good afternoon, Catherine Harrington, Chair of the Washington County Board of Commissioners, and happy to have pink on, just like the wall color behind Ebony.
Building bridges and connections. I love it, Chair. Thank you. I'm going to ask, we have welcome a new member, Mindy Statlander. Mindy, if you could introduce yourself and then give a little bit extra introduction of who you are and what you're here for.
If I don't know how to make it work.
That's the first test.
Just if it's.
Is that it? Okay, thank you for your help. Hi, everyone. I'm Mindy Statlander. I use she, her pronouns. I am serving right now as the interim CEO for HealthShare of Oregon, one of the two coordinated care organizations in this service area. I'm super excited to be here. I've been working in healthcare my whole career. Had the privilege of getting to work with Ben very early in that space. And it's nice to see a couple of friendly faces, familiar faces, lots of friendly ones around the room. The work that you are doing here is incredibly important, both for our community and for implementation of what the Oregon Health Authority is doing in the future. So just honored to be a part of it and excited to get to know all of you.
Awesome, thank you. It's an exciting time to have you joining. Could we go to staff, Liam?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Liam Frost, I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Department at Metro.
Patricia, I see you on our screen. Can we jump back to you?
Sure. Good afternoon, Patricia Rojas. I use she and her pronouns, housing director for Metro.
Thank you. Abby?
Hi, everyone. Abby Ahern, use she, her pronouns, and I am helping support this group.
Great, thank you. Malia?
Malia Dieter, she, her pronouns, program assistant in the housing department at Metro.
Great, thank you. Did I miss anybody online or in person?
Yeah,
Oh,
Ben, this is,
Vahid, yes, right in the middle.
yeah, Vahid Brown, he, him pronouns, Clackamas County Housing and Community Development.
Thank you. Sorry, Vahid. You're like literally right in my center line of sight. So did I miss anybody else? Okay, well, and I'm Ben Duncan, he, him, Kearns and West, your facilitator. So let's dive in. If we want to pull up slides, we can work through, we'll talk about what we're going to try to accomplish today, and then we'll dive into our agenda. Who's driving this slides today? Welcome. Well, as soon as you jump in, we'll have you introduce yourself. Nicole? Right on the spot.
Hi, I'm Nicole Larson. I am city liaison for Imago Dei Community and a licensed clinical social worker.
Great, thank you. So let's walk through our agenda and then we'll dive in. We have a lot to cover today. It's an exciting day, kind of continuing as we have, building off previous conversations. We're going to do as we always do. We'll ask our co-chairs to adopt our meeting summary. We'll go into public comment and just as a preview, if folks are joining online, would like to offer. I don't see anybody in the room for public comment, but if folks are joining online, you can press *9 to raise your hand for public comment. So you can get in the queue now as we walk through this. We'll get some staff updates on work that this group has previously approved to move forward. So we'll hear from Metro staff on progress in those directions. And then we'll revisit a conversation that we've had now over the last couple meetings. And hopefully today we'll be able to land on goal language and proposed recommendations around employee recruitment and retention. I know we've really digested the complexity of this issue, and I hope that today we can take our first steps towards actions moving forward. We'll have a conversation, both reflecting the survey, but also making sure we have time for discussion, kind of pros and cons of our proposed meeting calendar and cadence going forward. We'll get an update and presentation from the Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee. So Nui Becerra will join us later to talk about the work that both connects with and has relationship with the work that we're doing here. And then we'll finalize our meeting with closing and next steps. And maybe at the bottom it says we'll adjourn at 6 o'clock, if not earlier. So I do want to open it up. I don't think we received any public comment in writing. Is that correct, staff? So I will ask if there is anyone in the audience who would like to provide public comment. Please raise your hand if you're online. If you're joining by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute. For public comment, we offer 3 minutes for public comment. Do we have anybody in the audience? Are we seeing any? We'll do a last call for public comment. Again, if you're online, you can just raise your hand. If you are on the phone, *9. Give about 30 seconds for folks to find that raise hand button if they'd like. Okay, not hearing any, we will move on. So I'm going to pass it to you, Liam, right?
That's right. I just have a few progress updates, but before I get into that, I know that Jess Larson from Washington County would want to put, oh, Matt.
Yeah, don't we need to do this?
I already moved past one. I'm trying to move us real quick today. So, Matt, I'll pass it to you for our meeting summary approval.
I don't mean to preempt Ebony, but I move approval of the meeting summary.
So we have yeah, can I get a second?
Second.
That came from somewhere. Who said that? Ebony, thank
Right.
you. Can we ask, were there any edits or updates or changes to the meeting summary? Can't see you right now, so if folks are raising their hand. None in the room. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposition? Not hearing any, we'll move on. Thank you, co-chair, for keeping your facilitator on task today. Now we will pass it to Liam for staff updates.
And we'll try that again. Jess, did you want to make a quick announcement?
Thank you, Liam. Hello, all. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the line. I just wanted to get a moment to say we have an exciting party for housing happening next week in Washington County, and we'd like to invite you all out. We'll be celebrating the grand opening of the former Aloha Inn, which is a hotel that we purchased with affordable housing bond, and we'll be opening to 54 formerly homeless individuals and running homeless services programming through the wonderful supportive housing services measure we're here all celebrating and championing. So it's a great opportunity to come and celebrate this new project in Washington County and hang out, take a break from the work and see a great new building in our community. So it's Thursday at 2 p.m. At the former Aloha Inn, and I'll put the address in the chat if anyone's interested in joining.
Chair.
And this is Chair Harrington. Please know that, yes, it is an open invitation. In fact, if you're wondering if you went, would there be a chair for you? Yes, because I can't be there. I have to go back east to help my mom. So I would be thrilled if someone from this committee or the SHS Oversight Committee would be there for me, if nobody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Will there be cake? All right, make a note.
It's a big one for Ben. I just wanted to say congratulations to Washington County. It's such a huge lift in getting one of these projects off the ground, and it really speaks to the regionalism of our effort and the partnerships that we've made over the last couple of years. So congratulations, Washington County. That's wonderful news. So a few updates from me on the progress of the work of the TCPB and staff progress at that. We recently received a scope and a budget from a consultant to do that landlord work, the landlord recruitment work that you all agreed on some months ago. We're going to review that scope and that budget and execute pretty soon, I imagine, after we do that review. And that work will take place very, very soon. And we'll be working with county staff to gather that information and provide recommendations to us. I'm eager to get a timeline in front of you once we execute that scope, and I'm hoping I can bring that to you next month. Next Friday, we have a meeting with HealthShare and staff from the counties and from Metro to talk about potential areas of alignment, specifically around the Medicaid waiver, but broadly around the increasing need to align healthcare services with homeless services, specifically in permanent supportive housing. That is also related to one of the goals that the TCPB has agreed upon, and I personally am particularly excited about that meeting, Mindy. Also, you should know, I'm pulling the, as we say in the UK, the bonnet up here. We have a number of retreats happening at a staff level. Next week, the TCPB team will be meeting to chart out the next 6 to 9 months. Our goal there is to work plan deliverables for you, and also hopefully provide some draft agendas that can be reviewed by you all for the next 6 to 9 months, so you know what to expect at the TCPB meetings. We also have an additional retreat with county staff, and that's a little more nuts and bolts about how we're now planning to actualize the work of the goals that you've all agreed upon. The implementation happens at a county level, but we are going to be involved in facilitating some of that planning, and we are looking forward to coming back to you all to report on how that went. One other piece I'd like to update you on, and that, oh, 2 pieces actually. One, so we've appointed Mindy Statlander recently. Congratulations, us and everybody. That's wonderful. We also have a number of members serving right now for 1 year, and that year expires in May. You've all been contacted about your appetite for continuing to serve on this committee. You've all said yes, and so we are planning on bringing that as a package to the Metro Council on April 27th on consent. Last item for my update today, and that is, I think we have 2 open positions right now at the Housing Department at Metro. It's pretty easy to find our website and look up those positions. If you are particularly interested, we can actually send out an email to all members so you can send those positions out to your own networks. We are definitely interested in drawing the widest pool possible and the most diverse pool possible that we can, and I think we'd like to ask for your help on that. That's it, Ben.
Great, thank you. Any questions for, or reflections for Liam? Okay, thank you, Liam. Let's move on. If we can bring back up slides, and as we go into the kind of first part of our conversation, which is the continued discussion of employee recruitment and retention, and just want to acknowledge, that we have had a number of discussions around this issue, and really hoping that today we're going to ask you to kind of vote on a couple things. One is the goal language, right? Where do we want to be? My sense is that this group has coalesced around kind of that vision in a lot of ways, and I think getting to some language today that we can all agree on as kind of the future vision for how we ensure that we can maintain and have a stable workforce doing this incredibly important work will be the first part of our discussion. And then the second piece is really a set of recommendations, and I might describe those for us as first steps towards that goal. I think just reflecting back what I've heard from this body, we recognize it's complex. I don't think we have an immediate solution, but there are some recommendations that I hope are really reflective of what this group has laid out. So we're going to open up conversation and hopefully get to a place where we can vote on a set of recommendations that will start moving us towards that path and working towards that goal. So if we go to the next slide. And Liam, you want to walk through this, or you want me to?
I'm just going to say a few words
Yeah,
about
please.
this, and just to remind folks that when I say we, I'm talking about Metro staff and county staff presented this language to you, I think 2 meetings ago. It was in response to the long deliberation that you all undertook, and we put this language together in response to that. It's no surprise that this is the last one to be voted on, and I don't think it's any surprise that it's required more deliberation and conversation amongst you all because of that complexity that Ben was talking about, but also because of the different perspectives as you all come to this subject. I'll just point you out, Mike. You come from a business point of view, and you've asked some very pointy questions about the pool of candidates that we have to choose from. And I've heard from Monta as well about your concerns about different sources of funding and what that might do to an organization. So I point that out just because it merits that kind of discussion. But for today, what I want you to focus on is this end goal. We're talking about where we want to end up. And I want to remind everybody that when we're talking about this goal, we're not talking about how we get there, because we're going to be able to do that in an iterative way with you all. But what I want you to focus on is this goal the right goal, and you're gonna have some options in the next slide. And then the recommendation on how to, of how county staff and metro staff can weigh the factors with which to go along and understand how we can get to that end goal. So that's what we're really trying to do today. We're not trying to debate the substance anymore. We're trying to move towards the work in order to come back to you so that we can deliberate further over the next few months and years. That's it, Ben.
Great, thank you. So you can see this slide that's up right now with the original goal and original recommendation is where we started this discussion. If we go to the next slide, you're going to see the first part of our conversation, which is, and similar to what we've done in previous meetings, right? We're looking at kind of several options. One, keep the same goal language, fair and equitable pay for supportive housing services funded agencies and providers throughout the region. So that was where we started. What we have in front of us also is a second goal that breaks the kind of options into two separate goals. Goal A being supportive housing services funded agencies and providers throughout the region pay livable wages to direct service staff. So again, being more specific, reflective, I think, of what you all have spoken directly to. And goal B, under this kind of same vision, that accounts for the distribution of pay from lowest to highest paid staff within SHS funded agencies and providers is equitable throughout the region. So I want to pause there. You kind of have a choice in front of you. I want to open it up, just any questions or comments around these two options or any thoughts that folks have. So if we can maybe take the slide down so we can see each other, that'd be great. So I want to open it up and just see if folks have any comments or questions before I ask for kind of a vote on goal A or vote on either option 1 or option 2. Chair Harrington, please.
I didn't intend to be first. That's why I was looking to the screen, but I'm happy to prime the pump.
Please.
So I do have questions, and I also have a learning for me that may bore the rest of you. My question is this. I am trying to understand how the goal language around the distribution would ensure that we're doing a better job of lifting up the wages of these service provider workers so that they're more reflective of the value and the career path for the line of work that they're in. When I was at the table to help construct the recommendation for the original measure, we talked about those goals, and I've lost sight with the passage of time what the measure committed us to. So I'm trying to make sure we're successful with that. What has also come into play for the learning for me is I'm trying to get my head around what equitable pay means, and in this context, and here's why. We as an agency of Washington County are working to improve our bilingual pay policy because it's pretty bad and it's taking us some time. But what I have learned in this process is that we have taken our bilingual and multicultural employees. We've provided them with some pay compensation for their skills, not enough in my opinion, but also our practice has been through departments to direct all community members who've needed said support towards just these expert employees, these language expert and cultural expert employees, and have made no provision for the fact that it takes more time per customer or client instance to do this work. And we've not accommodated that caseload. So we've given them unreasonable case loads. So for me, learning from that, I'm trying to make sure I don't fall into a trap, a policy trap when it comes into practice. And I am not experienced or smart enough to be able to distinguish if one or the other might be setting me up to support a bad practice. So that's where I'm struggling. In this domain, I'm not sure what the better policy,
Yeah.
better goal is. So that's where I'm struggling.
So can we work through a couple things? So I think there was the measure language, right? So clarifying around what the language specifically was in the measure. I think there's a point of clarity to make sure that, and the way I'm understanding it is that option 2, even though it's listed as 2 separate goals, they go hand in hand as one vote, right? So it accounts for both livable wage and for this distribution of pay. And then I think you've weaved in, and I do think, your question around the definition of equitable pay might be worthy of this group's conversation, but also it connects to one of the recommendations that really accounts for where you're going, Chair. So Liam, can I have you hit on at least the measure language? And then if you can also clarify, maybe I'll look for a group agreement, that when we talk about option 1 and option 2, even though it has 2 goals, those 2 goals are going hand in hand. So I want to make sure that if what I'm saying is what we all are agreeing to. But you want to start us?
Sure.
It's right there in front of
Chair
me.
Harrington, thanks. Did you find it?
Yeah, on page 3. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize.
Definitions of equitable pay. Duh.
Well, thank you so much for raising a bunch of those questions, and I love how well prepared you come with hard copies to every meeting, Chair Harrington. I wish I was as prepared with hard copies. The language that you're referring to, and as it's reflected in option 2 in the PowerPoint, is reflected in the Metro Work Plan for SHS. It's pretty well spelled out, and it does separate livable wages from the distribution of wages throughout an organization. With regard to your question around bilingual folks who are providing that extra level of service, that's more about how do we get to an equitable distribution of pay, and it's in the recommendations, and I think that's perhaps what you might have seen. So it lives in the next vote, is where you'll find that. Did I cover everything there, Ben?
Well, I think you hit it, but Chair, I think you found some language. Do you want to read out the language of the definition of equitable pay as it relates to what you're referencing?
Yes, and it's on page 3 of the memo from Work Plan Addendum D, Section H, Procurement and Partners. A commitment to partner with service providers who affirmatively ensure equitable pay and livable wages for their workers, and who will provide anti-racist, gender-affirming services consistent with regionally established, culturally responsive policies and standards. So it says ensure equitable pay, and that's what I'm still trying to make sure I understand the definition of.
Yeah, so let's go Nicole and then Christina. Oh, Mercedes, oh yeah, I can't see that.
Am I looking at it
Thank you.
right?
Nicole, Christina, Mercedes.
Thanks. Liam, I understand what you said as this being more about an end goal rather than trying to discuss the process implementation of it today. But I am a little bit curious because I think it's helpful in determining the goal language to understand a bit more about the implementation. So is it that we make this goal and then it goes to the 3 counties and then the counties basically choose how they're going to implement that? Or are we allocating funding eventually that will go to the counties in order to raise these wages and make them equitable? I'm a little unclear about the process after we make this goal, and I think it would help inform it.
What a timely question.
Great.
Well, first to talk about the workflow of these goals, not just this one, but all the rest of them too. It's up to us as staff at Metro to convene with the county staff, who are the implementers, to figure out how we are going to realize the goals that you all have agreed upon with direction from the recommendations and return to you in an iterative way. Are we on the right track? What do you think? We're not going to wait for 2 years to come back and deliver a product that's already out there. Like you all are the Tri-County Planning Body, and we are required to return to you as we develop this plan. And that also means if there is a budget involved, there'll be presentations around the budget, especially if the regional, God, I wish I could remember it, the Regional Investment Fund is in play here. And if you recall, the RIF, as it's referred to, is 5% of the revenues received by each county that is designed specifically to be spent on TCPB priorities. So for example, whatever recommendations we get back and agree upon as Metro and county staff from the consulting about landlord recruitment, I suspect that budget would be within the 5%, and we would be able to spend that. You would be able to ask the counties to spend that money. When it comes to wages, I think that's an entirely different subject. It's going to require a heck of a lot more than 5% of what we have. But the Tri-County Planning Body does get to weigh in on regionalizing some of this work. And that's where this work right here before us lies. And it is immediately complex because of that, because of where the funding comes from. So I hope I went some way to answering your question there, Nicole.
Yeah, it helps. I think in terms of setting, pay equity and pay thresholds that are consistent across the 3 counties, it's just worthy of conversation, and meeting with a lot of executive directors as of late who are service providers. That's been a struggle that if, they're approached maybe with one contract that's inconsistent with the rest of their contracts for their workers, that can be problematic. So just trying to understand in the recommendation if there's any language necessary around those kind of pay standards in general or specifically targeted to workers in SHS. So
again, I think this particular one is going to be very, very complex, particularly because the solution here is multifaceted. It's not just about us. It's not just about different kinds of funders. And the county staff are going to be the people who will inevitably have to implement any kind of decision that is collectively made. And the counties are going to have to take that on in order to do that. And so what we will likely need to do is bring on a consultant who can help guide a lot of that work forward, because it is a controversial subject for many, many reasons. But I can commit to you, we will be returning to this body with regular updates on how we are collectively moving forward to answering it. And the last thing I'll say, and this is kind of a editorial, but this is hands down the biggest obstacle to success of this measure, hands down, and we have to crack this nut.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. And I'll just remind, right, I mean, there's a reason the recommendations don't say pay $33 an hour right now, right? I mean, I think we've kind of unpacked a lot of the complexities that are preventing us from landing on a specific recommendation at this moment. But when we get to that place, really being able to say, are these the first steps that are going to help us understand the landscape enough to use Liam's language to crack the nut? I do want to go, let's go to Christina, then Mercedes.
Mercedes was first.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Christina. Mercedes?
Thank you all. So I really want to appreciate, I think, all the comments that have been made so far, because I think they're really reflective of what I'm also worried is missing in some of the goal language. The way it reads, it really presumes that the total power to achieve this goal exists with the agencies and providers, when in truth, that power is held with the counties in their contracting practices. And so to Chair Harrington's comment about, like, are we moving forward a policy but not the whole thing, and then we end up kind of trapped, I worry that if we don't call out the role that the county contract process plays in this, we will have a lot of guidelines that are then not capable of being implemented. Just as Woods was also mentioned, we have providers who are a full quarter, if not more, behind on receiving reimbursements for invoices and work that has already been done. I just got notification of a COLA adjustment happening to a contract now in April that should have been started back in July. And yes, we can now back pay some for those staff, but the fact that that wasn't done when that contract was done, that's what holds us back from being able to pay those wages and be able to sustain those livable wages. So I'm gonna put something in the chat, but I really recommend that the goal language specifically say that the county contracts for SHS funded agencies and providers throughout the region will be constructed in a way that helps to achieve these livable wages, and really make sure that we are centering that this is a dual responsibility between the county and the providers. It is not a sole responsibility of the providers. We don't really get to set our own price for a lot of this. It is something that is negotiated, each contract, oftentimes one at a time. And especially in those counties where they've spread out their SHS fundings into multiple departments, then you're also doing that negotiation with multiple departments, right? So there has to be standards on the other side as well, so that when we're entering into those contract conversations, both sides are achieving livable wages. We don't have agencies trying to achieve livable wages and counties trying to spread the dollars out as far as possible, even if that means that we can't have livable wages.
Great, thank you, Mercedes. So I'm gonna maybe ask a couple things. So it sounds like you were gonna, there's no way I'm gonna be able to read what's in the chat, so I'll ask for some help from my colleagues. It sounded like you were making a case that there was talking about those, what's missing is the funders piece, and the goal language is focused on those who are funded. So it sounds like that's part of the critique you're laying in the goal language. I think I'm hearing in what you're saying, a potential addition to the recommendations that would really identify and call out the contracting mechanism as something that really needs to be centered in the recommendations to get us to this ultimate goal. So I think we can come back to that. So if you could put some language in and maybe think about, is that goal language or is it more towards the recommendation? I think that'll be really helpful as we get to kind of voting. Okay, I'm seeing some draft language there. Let's go, Christina.
I think it's very important that we put pay differential language in this recommendation, like for example, 20% for 20% extra for bilingual speakers. Because if we don't do that, I heard of community members a lot of times don't get paid the differential, although it's listed that they were gonna get paid more. But a lot of times they don't get to see like the contract of Metro, like when they're contracting with an organization, they don't get to see that. So a lot of times they don't get that. And if they do see it, I want to make sure that they see that it's like, what is the percentage, how much they should be getting. Many cities, like in Los Angeles and other cities, like bilingual staff, they're very clear. Like I remember back when I lived in California, I knew that police that I spoke other languages got 20% extra, but I don't really see it in many in the community. Like I don't see the community that do contracting work benefiting, and I don't see the organizations are paying the bilingual differential or cities or counties, because it's just like an elephant in the room, right? Like, oh, they should be getting paid more, they're working more, but they don't. So what can we do to put it here? Another thing is when we're talking workload, that is very true, that many bilingual people, it just takes more effort to finish a case, because there is a lot of times, you have to get an interpreter, you have to find people at different times because they're working like crazy hours, and they don't, like, there's so many, they don't know tech. So you have to support them with many, many things to be able to serve one person, but yet you get more because there is a bigger need. So the balance is important, workload is important, So I think, I don't know, like, I think to me it's like, how, like, I don't know, like, if we're talking about, and I also don't want to be micromanaging at the same time, but I think it's important that our contractors are not overworked and underpay. And I know we cover a lot of the how to be fair, but I fear that if we're not more specific about how, like, for example, if you have a English speaker only workload, you get 5 clients, but if you, you know, if you do speak other language, you get 3 clients, something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. So there's a couple things coming up. So again, kind of similar to Mercedes' comments, if there's specific suggestions around the goal versus recommendations, there's a couple things I'm hearing from you, Christina, that seem important. And I think you used the example of the 20% pay differential, and my sense is, right, and I think what we've tried to avoid in this very moment is to land on and come to agreement on a specific percentage versus saying that our next step should be to explore, or what does it say? It says consider ways to allow for differential pay. So rather than saying we're going to land on 20% should be the differential pay, we should be really exploring and getting more depth of understanding around what is the landscape, what should that percentage be, how do you account for you know, the impacts of workload on as it relates to compensation. Now, we haven't talked about, even though it's titled employee recruitment and retention, this is the second time now that workload has come up. So I don't know if that's something we can come back to in the recommendations, if this group feels like we should include an exploration of how workload can be managed based on particularly bilingual caseloads and culturally specific caseloads. So I would maybe ask us to come back to that during the recommendations. Because I think we've largely focused on compensation, wage and benefit, and not necessarily on workload. So I'm going to ask us to come back, Christina, to what you said, and Chair Harrington, I know you brought this back as we go into recommendations. Liam, are you wanting to respond?
Yeah, I wouldn't usually want to do this, but I just want to kind of ground ourselves in the goal that's in front of you, or the goal options in front of you, is the end state. We want to get to the point where people who are doing the work on the front lines, as it were, are getting paid a living wage to live in the place where they work. I just want to make a suggestion, Ben, that perhaps we want to go to the recommendation slide, because hearing from Mercedes and then hearing from Christina, some of the content of what they were bringing up is actually included in the recommendation options. And so while we tried to start with this end place, we're going to the recommendations immediately. So perhaps we could satisfy the recommendations and get back to the goal that way.
Yeah, I love that. You're doing my job for me. And before we go there, Sahan, welcome. You want to introduce yourself? Say hello. Look at those shoes, man. My goodness, we've had this pink theme today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sahan McKelvey. Glad to be here with all of you. And if there's some other question I'm supposed to answer for today, then let me know.
Nope, just say it who you are. That's perfect. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Well, I think, Patricia, you had a hand up. Can we come to you? And then I like your recommendation, Liam. Let's talk through the recommendations. And Nicole, I think you were going there too. If we can ground ourselves in what the recommendations are, maybe we can come back and look to, will those be in service of goal language that we can move forward and feel good about? Patricia?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate this conversation because what's coming up for me is the complexity in answering the question, the complexity of getting to the desired state, if you will, which is your goal language, right? And I think that during the process that staff will take with counties, with consultants, like there will be a discovery process. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to come up that, if you will, are going to have to be addressed in order to get to that desired state. Mercedes, some of what you were raising earlier to me really stands out as a very particular body of work around contracting practices that I think I just wanted to highlight as like that feels like a very specific area that I think is worthy of talking about. And I just want to encourage us, like, we don't have to figure out or know all of the areas that we have to solve for to be able to get to that end state. That's part of, I think, the next stage of the process, which is doing that work with the consultant, with the jurisdictions to try to unpack really what is the level of complexity here that we're dealing with, and then what is the sequence of events and what are the areas we're going to have to tackle to be able to get there. So I just want to honor, like, it is a very complex issue that has a lot of consequences and for a lot of in a lot of different ways. And so I just want to create the space for us to hold that we don't have to know exactly the how we're going to do this right now. We have to lean in on agreeing to wanting to get there, which is step one, and then that creates the road for us to figure out how we do that.
Good, thanks, Patricia. Any other thoughts before we move? Let's move to the recommendations, see if we can come to alignment on those and get to agreement, and then we'll come back up to the goals. Are folks okay with that? Okay, so the recommendation language, and I'll just, kind of reflect, the original language included much of this. And yet there are some additions and shifts that have been made in reflection of what you all have brought forward. And I think this conversation is lending itself to potentially some additional edits. But the recommendation language options that you see here are 4 bullets: map current wage and benefit conditions, draft a housing worker wage framework that provides guidance to counties and SHS-funded agencies and providers, consider ways to allow for differential pay for lived experience, bilingual employees, and culturally specific organizations. And the last bullet, consider ways to address challenges faced by organizations with multiple funding streams. So having heard that and reflecting back on the conversations, I want to just open it back up. So I think, if there's any comments or questions around what's here, although hopefully this is largely reflective of conversations y'all have had, I do want to open it back up, maybe to Mercedes, Christina, and others, Chair Harrington, who have brought some other additions here. Is there anything missing or anything that you would want to add based on what you just heard from Patricia?
Mercedes had their hand up first.
Great, thank you. So can we take this off so I can see people again? Mercedes, jump in.
Thank you. And I did recognize in the packet that the recommendations did include the guidance to counties. But going back to what Liam had mentioned about what is our end state, I guess for me, part of that end state is the responsibility of government partners when they are relying on direct service providers to do that work, to take on that responsibility of establishing that high standard of engagement and partnership. And so I don't necessarily see the county part as secondary or, an edge issue as far as what's happening with providers. I think it's very much the counties set the tone and expectation when they fund these services. And if the counties have an expectation, for example, that a nonprofit organization is going to subsidize their allocation with an allocation from someplace else, that is establishing an expectation of what they are willing or not willing to pay for, right? So and this is very common practice. There are contracts that come with a mandated match fund, for example. That's that government agency saying, I expect you to subsidize me with somebody else's money. And so to say that we want you to have livable wages, but we're not taking actual responsibility for that, I think it makes me worried about whether or not we're actually going to achieve that in the end. And so I really feel like part of the goal needs to call out this power dynamic and this partnership expectation in order to reach that goal of the livable wage for it to be successful.
Great, thank you, Mercedes. Let's come back to that because it sounds like a goal C, or maybe it's an edit to goal. So I got to keep putting on my readers. Maybe an edit to goal A. If I think I hear your point, it's really that the way the goal language, you're acknowledging that there's language in the recommendation. So I'm going to try to keep us there for a second. But if I hear you correctly, you're saying that again, the goal language is missing the ownership and obligation of the funder. And it seems to read as it's placing all the onus on the funded to pay. So it seems like that's a tension point that we need to address. Do we have hands up? Mercedes, will you maybe introduce, I mean, so what would be your proposal, right? Because and then I want to open it up to the group to reflect on how you would propose us moving forward. If it's related to recommendation, and then I'm going to come back to goal. So do you have any changes in the recommendation language at this moment?
No.
Okay, Ebony, can we come to you?
Yeah, I was just asking if it was were you trying to update the goal or the language around the goal, Mercedes? Just so I can.
Mercedes, I think she was goal.
Yeah, so I was making a recommendation to the goal A.
Okay, so let's come back to that, Mercedes, and we'll put you back on the spot. So on the recommendations, is there anything missing, or is there any points of clarity? Or are we ready to vote on these 4 recommendations as they appear on our page? Oh, Ebony, is your hand, is that a new hand?
No, sorry, I can't see the hand. It blends in with the wall behind me.
Okay, Sahan, please.
I may have missed this, but I would want to make sure that we are including some form of time frame in here around these recommendations, the recommendation language, and for each of the goals.
Great, so Liam or staff, do you want to speak to this? So I don't know, we don't have any built-in assumptions per the way this is written. So can you speak to that?
That's the next step. That's what we got to figure out. After you all give us your guidance, we have to convene with the county staff and figure out what we're going to come back with in terms of a work plan and deliverable.
Are you making a recommendation though, Sahan, not just broadly, but do you have a time frame in mind, like by a certain date that you'd want to propose?
Not necessarily, but yes, if it's wrong. I don't want it just to be out there. At some point, we're gonna get there. I don't want that to be our time frame. If our time frame is defined as the middle of next fiscal year, or July 1st to start the next fiscal year, or the start of the federal fiscal year in October, like I think that we can discuss what that time frame needs to be, but I strongly feel there needs to be one because this conversation isn't new. And without that level of deadline, urgency being placed on this conversation, we've been having this conversation for the last 3 years and got not very far with it. I would also just say, just with the recommendation language, I don't disagree with any of these things, but some of these things have already happened. Like map current wage and benefit conditions, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing that because most of us have participated in some form of that, not all together, but we participated in that. That should be able to be done by the end of this month. So some of these things are not stuff that I would disagree with, but I would say we should be able to move this needle pretty quickly.
Thank you, Sahan. Chair Harrington?
If I could first pick up on some of what you've mentioned. Having a seat at both this committee and the SHS Oversight Committee, the picture you just painted about current wage and benefits should already exist. That is information that we need to be able to collect and bring forward to the SHS Oversight Committee table, right, as we have to provide information to them. The reason I raised my card is as we're going through this process of defining these different areas and the goals and the recommendations, I'm thinking that, as this work is being done, if any one of the counties is having difficulty with the nature of this, I expect us to hear back and to come back and learn from that and move forward. So for me, even though my head is having a little trouble grasping all of this, I find myself using that phrase, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I want us to put a stake in the ground and move forward, learn from that, and do a better job going forward. That's all.
Thank you, Chair. Matt?
Yeah, let me build on that, because I think what Chair Harrington just said is extraordinarily important. And one way to look at it is if what we did is to say, okay, we're going to have an initial part of the solution, as many of the recommendations as we can get done by X date. And we can debate what that is. I mean, my opening thought is the end of April, but maybe it takes a little longer. But the process is one in which if we set the date and then figure out how much can we get done by that date, that would change a little bit of the conversation. And I don't know, I defer to Liam and the counties as to whether this would work. But the plus side of that is that then it becomes, to Chair Harrington's point, what's the definition of the good? This problem, as I think everybody has said, is just monumentally important. So let's get as much of it done in the next couple of months. I don't know what the right date is, but pick a date that is realistic to get a bunch of stuff done, because as has also been said, a lot of this is already done. There's a major wage survey that I think comes out by the end of April. That's why I picked that. And the consequence is, if that covers a lot of what we need, then we can use that to be able to make progress. So I don't know if that approach, I think it's really up to Metro and the county, so I'm not making an amendment to anything, but just suggesting that this is a way to look at it, and when you come back to us with a date by which you believe you can get X amount done, and then we can have that conversation.
So I'm going to have Liam maybe respond. I mean, so why don't you respond, and I'm going to try to figure out where we are.
Yeah, and I'll be quick. Well, I just wanted to confirm what I think I'm hearing here, which is, one, we want to build on existing work. There have been wage studies upon wage studies. I agree with you, Sahan. And then two, you want to hear clear timelines of what's possible for county staff and Metro staff to come back to you with whatever deliverables. It would be helpful to know what kind of deliverables. But we can commit to that. We can absolutely come back to you in May and give you some timelines about when we want to get it done, and you can tell us whether those timelines are acceptable or not. But we would need to talk to county staff to understand what their capacity is and when they think they can do that.
So in that, and Sahan, I'm going to look at you. There's a little bit of trust factor and process trust factor here, right? So I think what I heard you suggest is really that this should have by a certain date, you will come back with these deliverables. I think what you're hearing is, do you trust a process where we will be getting updates and we'll be able to track and push back and respond to a proposal? I guess I want to put you on the spot. If you want to respond to what Liam said, if that's okay.
And my response to that would be, I would like to, but honestly, no. I don't trust a process where we are going to be moving the target as we go and saying, oh, we'll give another update in the middle of the summer by when we can have the next thing done. And then we'll get another update at that point when we can move to the next thing. I think that has been the process. And not saying that that's been the process for this body, but this has not been the only body to try to tackle this. That's been the process. And I want to trust that. And I want to believe that this body will be able to do that better and do it differently and do it in a way where that process plays out the way that we say is going to play out. But that process has been described. And I'm not the only provider on this body. And I think all of us who are providers can say, we have not seen that process bear the level of fruit that we have initially discussed. So again, I want to, but honestly, no, I don't trust that.
So if I'm looking at a date, April 12th, what would be your expectation? I'm just gonna keep on you, like, put a date out there and let's think about it. I mean, because I think what you're looking at is by a certain time frame that we want to come back with this type of information.
Well, and I would want to say, by a certain time frame, we want to reach this end game that we're describing and work backwards from there, and not work forwards towards the next step. When do we want that done? Because we're going to get to a place where we start having to take some hard steps, and we need to be able to say, this is where we're going, and this is where we have to be. If we want to get to this end date by the start of fiscal year '25, by this coming October, we got to be here, and we have to be there, or else we're not going to hit that deadline. We're not going to hit that end game, and that's what I would prefer to see. Is we're working backwards from a defined state that we know we want to be there by then.
So maybe a question around, does the language that we started with, that was in section 3, addendum D, or whatever it was, does that give any sort of timeline for when that's supposed to happen? Is that the life of the measure? So that's one question. Is there a timeline that's dictated already by the work plan? And two, I guess I'm gonna put Metro on the spot, and it's Liam, maybe Patricia. I mean, do you hear, Sahan, is there something that at least in the recommendations portion that you can say in the next 6 months, in the next 8 months, whatever it is, that we can say, we expect to have this part of the work done? I think your broader question, Sahan, about when are we gonna reach this goal state is an important one as well. So I'm gonna put you on the spot, Liam, to see if.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing from Sahan is less about like these component deliverables and when the heck are we actually gonna get to that point of having a livable wage for folks who are funded by SHS funding. And that is up for grabs. That is a timeline you all should deliberate on and decide, and we can help inform that discussion, but it's up to everybody around this table. I will say too that just to remind us all of the difficulty around SHS isn't necessarily the lack of funding. If Clackamas County said to every service provider that received SHS funding, we are requiring a base level of $26 an hour for all folks, there'd be some service providers that could not do that. And that's because in one of these recommendations right here at the end there, multiple organizations have multiple streams of funding that preclude that class comp parity. And so that's what we're really trying to solve for here. It isn't wage equity across the board. It's wage equity. Well, you haven't agreed upon the goals yet. Let's take a step back. But the goals in front of you are about SHS-funded services, not writ large across the county. So getting to that endpoint and reverse engineering, we are here for it. But I also want to hear from my boss, Patricia Rojas, too.
So
I'm sure she wants
Patricia,
to
why
say
don't you
something.
jump in, and then if that's accurate, what he just said in terms of reflecting the end goal and not necessarily kind of landing on and debating language around the recommendations. Patricia, you want to jump in, and then I'm going to ask about the content that's here and try to then get us to that goal and come back to what Sahan has challenged us with.
Thanks for that. So again, I appreciate the complexity of this conversation. Part of me feels like, I mean, Sahan, you're not wrong that there has been a lot of work, and I think part of our challenges as a community has been to kind of set our parameters and sticking to those. So I don't disagree with that timelines should be developed. But just to be clear, like, I don't think that we're in a position today to set realistic timelines based on this conversation. So I feel like I don't know if this would be helpful, but would it be, would one option is to first of all say, one of these bullets could be something to the extent of that we will develop timelines with the Tri-County Planning Body for this body of work. Right, so that we are saying we're going to develop timelines, because when I look at like the first bullet and the second bullet and even the third bullet, I think we could commit to faster timelines than that second bullet, which is much more about the actual implementation. And to Liam's point, how do we start to address the challenges with implementation for various stakeholders, be it a nonprofit, be it counties, be it, so like that's going to take more time, I think, to dig into and come up with the date of saying, we think that by this date, we will have a framework that, and I think it's important that it be implementable, right? But that we have a framework that everybody's going to align with, that will take more time. And so we have to figure out capacity and all of the things that are involved to make a commitment. So my recommendation is that one thing we could do is put some language in this recommendation section that speaks to creating timelines that we all get on board with, and then coming back next time with some more thoughts on what that could look like at a high level.
Okay, we'll hold that as a proposal. Monta, and then Christina first, and then Monta, and then Chair Smith, I want to come back to, you think you had something in the chat. I want to lift your voice in. What? Oh, she left. Well, she had something in the chat. We'll read it out loud. So let's go, Christina.
I think what Mercedes was saying about the goals, she talked about how reimbursement was taking a long time from Metro. And if that is happening, I don't know how we can reach to our goal. That needs to be fixed internally first. Because what about if we set up a date, a timeline, but that problem is still existing? So I will propose that gets addressed ASP, and I don't know what it will take at Metro to do disbursement faster for nonprofit organizations or for whoever they're contracting, because that's very important. Like I mean, she talked about somebody call us being back in June. That is not fair for anybody. So what can Metro do to speed up that process? And then I think once that is fixed, it will help us a lot with accomplishing the goal and with putting timelines. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the reference was for counties paying their contracted partners, not Metro.
Okay, correction.
No, but your point is still made, Christina. And I wonder if that's, well, I want to come back to the contracting piece. So let's go Monta, and then let's see where. Oh.
Okay.
We'll come back to, so let's, Monta, add.
Are you still asking for recommendations on the language?
I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Just back to what Mercedes was sharing, I think what I heard from her is just having some teeth in some of the recommendations around how the whole system's going to lift. I know it's not Metro's or SHS's responsibility to lift the greater system, but I just think some simple language, like instead of consider ways to address challenges, would be Metro will work with Tri-County leadership and share our goals around raising wages within SHS. Just some language saying, you're going to do your best to make recommendations to countywide leadership of what we're doing here at Metro, and they can take a look at that. Just from my perspective, I'm already looking at ways to divest out of county contracts right now that are old and moving to new funding sources. I'm going to move to SHS. We can lead the way in this, and it's going to either leverage counties to take a look at their resources, or organizations like mine are divesting from them. And I think just, an aside comment is counties need to look at their resources and figure out maybe they can't buy as much service as they're buying, and they need to go to nonprofits and say, we're actually buying too much for too little. We want to buy less with more money so we can build the workforce. So again, it's not that we can lead the way on it. Metro can make recommendations to the greater system, and then we can just see where it goes, because again, we don't have the control over it, but I think language like that would be helpful in that, in the recommendations.
Great, thank you, Monta. Sahan, that card's still up.
I will just say brilliant, Monta. I was going to say make very similar statement to that. Just when addressing the language for number 4, I want us to consider ways to address those challenges, but I do not want what we do to be delayed because we cannot solve those challenges when those challenges are created by other entities. And again, as a provider, it would be helpful for me to say to the county or the state or the joint office, I can get funded by SHS dollars to pay $27 an hour, but you only fund me to pay $23, so I can't take this additional funding. That's helpful. That helps move that forward. I don't want us to say we're not going to put that out because everybody won't be able to take it. And even if we put out language that said, we will fund you up to this and you can take up to this, depending on what the fair employment that you have to be able to abide by, like, that would make sense to me. It does not make sense to me for us to delay doing the right thing because we're waiting for everybody else to also be able to do the right thing.
Looking at the screen, I can see everybody over here. That's why I keep looking over there. Let me try to figure out where we are. Yeah, Chair.
Thank you, because I'm really lost.
Yeah, we've moved around a lot of things, so I'm going to try to figure out a couple pieces that have come up and try to figure out, and can we, I don't know what's most helpful for folks, having the screen up or being able to see each other. So there's at least 4 things that I think have come up that we need to kind of work through. One was kind of the piece around workload. And I don't know, and maybe I'll ask particularly, I think Christina, Chair Harrington, maybe Mercedes, others have brought this up. Does the differential pay around lived experience, bilingual employees, and culturally specific, does that need different language? Or is workload part of the way that differential pay would be considered? So I want to start with that. I know we heard something about the differential workload that's really directly related, and I don't know if it's really about caseload management or if it's around compensation for caseload management. Can I ask that question or see if that's a different recommendation? Zoe?
Yes, I have a recommendation. The cultural specific organization kind of bothers me a little bit because I'm not part of a cultural specific organization, but 47% of my staff is responsive, culturally aware. I am from a different culture, so if we can also add culturally specific organization and culturally responsive organizations, those who are not identified as culturally specific but serve our very diverse communities, because we try to match our staffing the way that our community looks. So.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to that. So that's number 5. So let's hold that around a topic around culturally responsive. Can I ask the folks that talked about workload, is that a separate conversation or is it captured here appropriately?
I think it's separate. I see them as 2 different items.
Who else brought that up? Chair Harrington, you had brought that up. And
I brought up workload as an example of how Washington County is struggling as an agency with its differential pay improvements. I was not suggesting that we add workload into this at all. So I'm really lost.
Well, that's just clarity. So I wanted to get clarity because I think that is where you started, right? Is that was connecting workloads to differential pay. We're hearing that it's something totally separate. This is kind of a new topic that's been raised around the room.
I don't know that workload case management is a problem for SHS at all. I was describing my learning about not SHS related with our agency and our own bilingual pay policy, as it has sensitized me to try to understand as we are working on the goal language and the recommendations.
Okay.
But I'm really, if we don't leave here with this topic closed today, my spending an hour to drive here and my time to drive home makes this really challenging.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So you heard from Chair Harrington. Can I ask folks that have brought up workload, is that something that is captured here, or is that something that, Christina, you're arguing that it's something that needs to be added? I'd love to hear from your colleagues. How do we want to address this? Is it incorporated in differential pay? Mercedes?
So I put some recommended language into the chat that we could add to this recommendation, because I do think one thing that happens is as you add money to an existing contract, you just kind of keep adding to the outcomes as well. So we could also have one of these bullet points be, this is what I put in the chat, assess the reasonable scale of outcomes and caseload as it relates to compensation, just as an additional input as we're looking at this mapping of wages and benefits and the differential pay.
Can you say that again?
Assess reasonable scale of outcomes and caseload as it relates to compensation.
And that would be an additional recommendation. Can we add, somebody on the slides, can we add that to a slide? Yeah, can we put?
I'm articulating with the mic on, if we're going to have a hybrid meeting and use all the tools of the hybrid meeting, then we need to be able to project that.
Yeah, we're gonna do it in real time. Let's switch the camera as we're making the real-time adjustment with Mercedes edition that captures workload. I know contracting came up. So right now we have, where's the one that we just added? Let's go one by one. Folks good with map current wage and benefit conditions? Are we good with that recommendation?
What I heard from Sahan earlier was that there's a lot of that work that's already been done, so perhaps we can add additional language that says map current wages, benefit conditions, and include previous or existing work.
With that addition, can I get a thumbs up that we are good with that bullet point? Map current wage and benefit conditions, include previous and existing work, right? We're building on what's happened. The mapping, just on the first bullet, on previous work that's happened around wage and benefit conditions, yes, but certainly an overlay with SHS. Can I get a thumbs up that folks, we can see you over here, so let's keep the screen up. Thumbs up that folks are good with that first bullet? Is there any major objections? Can't live with it? Okay. Draft a housing worker wage framework that provides guidance to counties and SHS-funded agencies and providers. And I think to your earlier comments, Mercedes, I think this is trying to build in, that's giving guidance around, that can include some of the work around contracts. Do folks thumbs up, feel like we're okay moving forward with that bullet point? Are there any major objections? Consider ways to allow for differential pay for lived experience. Yeah.
Sorry, Yvette, did you say something? You want to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I was just, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I just think that Mercedes really may try to make, to me, I took it as a real strong point about saying the county contracts. That just the word contracts with the county, I think that's really important because, it is something that, really can sway things. And I don't know, it's just, I just think that it's just best if we could just add that one additional.
If we were to say draft a housing worker wage and contract framework that provides guidance to counties, would that address people's concerns? And Nicole, I see your,
Are we modifying the original goal with the inclusion of county
We're not even back to
language, or are we modifying the recommendations?
right now, we're just
That's-
modifying recommendations.
I just don't know if we need both is all.
Well, we'll try to align the goal with what we land on here.
Okay.
If we can. So if we were to say draft a housing worker wage and contract framework or contracting framework that provides guidance to counties and SHS-funded agencies and providers, can I get a thumbs up that that's going in the right direction? Patricia?
Just a suggestion, maybe as a sub-bullet, evaluate and align contracting practices to support equitable pay or whatever, like something that it's in support of that second bullet, I guess what I'm trying to say. Because I think that it's worth calling out, and the second bullet as it stands, I think is important to preserve that integrity as well. So kind of almost thinking, is there a way to do like a sub bullet that calls that contracting piece out?
Say that again, Patricia. I don't think I caught what's missing in bullet number 2 that you're trying to capture as a sub-bullet, which makes me nervous. I don't.
Yeah, so, because before you put in contracting, so, because I think what we're saying is we want to develop a framework. So, yeah, my brain is having a hard time wrapping around contracting framework. So it's almost like draft a housing worker wage framework that provides guidance to counties and SHS funded agencies and providers, and then sub-bullet, like including an evaluation and alignment of contracting practices across counties to support equitable wage or something of the sort. It's just it was an idea. You don't have to take it. It's just a thought.
So I'm going to try to avoid sub-bullets. If we go to draft housing work, so finish that sentence, and then includes an evaluation of contracting practices. Would that work?
Yeah, includes an evaluation and alignment.
Mercedes, I'm looking at you because you've brought this up a few times.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that makes sense. When we get back to the goal, I am still going to.
I know you are.
That we
I know
change
you
that,
are.
but
I know you are.
I'm comfortable with the recommendation and adding the contracting evaluation and recommendations for alignment to achieve an equitable wages.
Draft a housing worker wage framework that provides guidance to counties and SHS-funded agencies and providers and includes contracting evaluation and alignment. With that language, are folks thumbs up, ready to move forward? I'm looking at thumbs, looking at thumbs. Any major objections? There we go. Third bullet, consider ways to allow for differential pay for lived experience bilingual employees and culturally specific organizations. I know, Zoe, you had raised cultural responsive. I don't know if we want to have a conversation about that, or whether maybe I'll just ask where folks are at with this specific. So, Sahan, I'm going to come to you, please. No, you can jump in, and then because Zoe already made her recommendation.
So including culturally responsive in this language scares the hell out of me. Zoe, I know where you're coming from, and I'm not sure which agency you work for, and I'm not saying anything to disparage that agency, but this creates a giant loophole for mainstream white agencies to potentially be able to take advantage of and appropriate funding that is intended for culturally specific work. Because every agency can say, I'm culturally responsive.
Yeah, and so Zoe, I'll look back to you. I mean, I think this is really around differential pay versus funding streams, but I accept your argument. Zoe, do you have any response? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a vote, and then if there's some real distinction, we can come back to it. But Zoe, I wanted to give you a chance to maybe speak to your thought and in response to some.
With the contract that we have with the SHS, I made a very intentional approach to hire a staff that match the community in need out there. So maybe it's my approach as a new director of housing and stability for community. I work for community action in Washington County, and understands, the disparities and maybe I am particularly doing that work in my organization, who is not cultural specific, but it's something that I'm trying to elevate with partners and the stakeholders that so we do serve the community out there, and we try our efforts to hire the staff that mirrors that. So we have bilingual staff in many different languages. So it was just that distinction. We're not a cultural specific organization. No, we're not. But we do serve our diverse community, and we're responsive to that. Linguistically, culturally, as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to just ask for a vote.
Ebony has a hand,
Oh,
and Patricia too.
Ebony, then Patricia. Patricia has the old hand. Ebony?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to respond and say that like maybe instead of just saying culturally specific organizations, maybe culturally specific organizations and programming, so that those organizations who maybe aren't culturally specific but do have culturally specific programming are available to more funding to support those programs and expand those programs.
I'm seeing Zoe's giving a head up if so culturally specific organizations and programming still continues to culturally specific. I think maybe to your point, Sahan, but you're looking at me funny. So before I ask for a vote.
I just think that one of the biggest reflections of real culturally specific work or programming is leadership. And if you are a white leader of an organization and you are then able to hire a minority to now say that now I'm providing culturally specific programming to this population, but I'm still calling the shots as the white leader, that's not the same thing to me. And again, I don't think that these points are being raised in any like malicious or nefarious way, but I do see the potential for malicious and nefarious people to take advantage of this, and I think that could create a loophole that would allow for a clever, malicious person to appropriate funds that should be going towards culturally specific purposes.
Thank you, Sahan. Christina?
Yeah, from an equity standpoint, I think we need to be very protective, and I agree with Sahan. I mean, I understand, you know, how soy does good and wants to do good for the community. Unfortunately, there is many appropriation of funds for equitable and equity and diversity. So I'm trying to find ways to still honor the work, but I want to make sure that there is no appropriation of funds. So that's a hard call, but yeah, I totally agree with Sahan. Like yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go Jess, then Chair Harrington.
Sorry, I wanted to make sure you weren't moving to voting. Yes,
No,
yes.
let's go Jess, then Chair Harrington. Jess.
Thanks. I just want to thank the committee for this is a very complicated conversation. I appreciate how everyone is really engaging and leaning in. It's going to be complicated work for sure. As just a point of process, I think the language gives us lots of flexibility here to explore what are the options for how we build recommendations from this proposed direction. So I think including expansive language here, keeping in culturally specific organizations and programming helps us to look at the complexities for how differential pay could work for those organizations. It doesn't commit us to implementing these, but it definitely allows us to fully explore this and bring back recommendations for the committee for you to further consider. So I just want to offer that that I think we still have time to further understand this, and this language leaves us open to all the possibilities.
Thank you, Jess. Chair Harrington.
I want to make sure that I think I understood your example, and I'm trying to make sure that I understand it, that this whole bullet is enabling that the possibility of that bad situation that you spoke to. Or was it just a part of it?
I think what I heard, Sahan, I don't know if you want to respond, is just that when you describe culturally specific organizations, there's a very specific definition of what that means and what the leadership structure and how they're rooted in community, et cetera. And when you add programming, you can have a small program that's culturally specific, but it's within a larger white
organization.
mainstream organization. And I think you're raising some of your concerns, Sahan.
Yes, that is what I was speaking to, and Chair Harrington, I do completely see what you're saying, that this whole bullet could say that. Like when you say, consider ways to allow for differential pay for lived experience bilingual employees, that could all happen under the guise of this is culturally responsive. I just don't want to call out in our language equating culturally specific and culturally responsive. And I think that sets us down a path that, again, creates the potential for a giant loophole that I don't want to see get opened.
Well, that's what I was trying to make sure I was clear on.
Yeah.
Because at this juncture, where we're just trying to get going and really build on things, I'm fine. My idea is to document the case that we're trying to avoid, if we are in fact trying to avoid that.
I think that's fair. So,
And,
sorry.
footnote it somehow, but just remind ourselves of, both as we're striving to enable something, to look out for, or
So I'm going to ask for a vote. Jess, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Apologies, old hands.
Old hand, all right. So I think we stripped away, Mercedes, yeah, her hand just blends in. Mercedes, jump in.
I was going to recommend, I think, given the conversation that happened here, I think we could leave it as it originally was. And for programs like Zoe's that she's talking about, it would still end up being assessed as a possibility under those bilingual employees. So I think there's still a way for us to be able to understand what that differential looks like without adding programming or without adding culturally responsive. And I think it's still broad enough. And I think we should leave it as it originally was.
So I'm gonna build from there, Mercedes. So and remind folks, I think our charter says majority will rule the day, but we want to make sure that folks don't feel major objections. So if we went back to the original language, consider ways, we'll assess that. If we went back to original language, do folks have, let me get a thumbs up if you're good with moving forward with that. And then let me assess where folks are at. Are there major objections? Zoe, are you at a thumb sideways or are you at a thumbs down?
I have many bilingual employees, so yeah, it will fall into the bilingual employees. And I don't want to take away the importance of the cultural specific organization funding. That's not my intent. No. They all need to be elevated. I was just advocating for all my bilingual staff that are part of this.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thanks for, I appreciate your advocacy. So I think we can land on this bullet. Thank you for that conversation. It was an important one to work through, and I think we'll set us up well into the future. The fourth bullet, consider ways to address challenges by organizations with multiple funding streams. I think we've talked about this a number of times. Can we get a thumbs up if folks feel like that's an important dynamic? Is there any major objections? We could, yeah, we'll use our style guide later, so we have an edit we'll bold, consider, if that becomes the case, but as long as we're good with the language. The last one, assess reasonable scale of outcomes and caseloads as it relates to compensation. So hopefully this captures at least the spirit of folks talking about compensation as it relates to caseload. Thumbs up? Any thumbs down or major opposition? So is there anything else that I don't even want to ask this question. Is there anything else that we are missing? Are folks good? These are a good set of recommendations. We've just come to agreement. Okay, dare I move us back up to the goal language. So Mercedes, I'm going to start with you. So we can see all of each other. Let's pull up the slide with goal language. So I'm going to just ask direction first. Are folks wanting to go into, is anybody advocating for goal one? Thumbs up if goal one is your favorite. Option one, I mean. So we got Chair Harrington, one thumbs up for the kind of original language. Chair Harrington, Mindy, we got two. Okay, y'all are in the minority. We'll come back to you. That's okay. Is there three? Manta? Yeah, option one. Okay, we have a couple folks that are fine with option one. I do want to then open it up. So for the rest of you, I'm going to assume that means you want to explore option two, which includes the kind of disaggregated goals. Am I accurate in saying that the rest of the group is moving in towards option two? Mercedes, you're shaking your head?
Yeah, I'm going to drop my recommendation in the chat again. I like goal A, but again, it's missing the recognition of the power dynamic and the role of the counties. So my recommendation would be, oh, someone threw it up there.
Yep.
That county contracts for SHS funded agencies and providers will fund agencies and providers and establish standards throughout the region to achieve livable wages for direct service staff.
So it's kind of a continuation of goal A. Is that accurate? Or are you saying that's a different, is that a goal C, or is that's attached to goal A, right, Mercedes?
Yes. So
Yes.
it's really just adding the counties in front of the supportive housing services portion to identify again that this is a dual responsibility between the providers and the county contracts.
Great. So I think you've captured, hopefully folks understand the spirit of what Mercedes has made a point on, that really puts the dual onus on both the funders and fundees to hold responsibility for that. Any questions, comments, last pieces around goal A or goal B? Sahan, please.
Mercedes, what I hear you saying is
You'll
you
go
are wanting to
first.
replace goal A with that. Is that correct, or you're wanting to add that to goal A?
I think it's redundant if it's just added to it, but if
I agree. I
that-
just want to make
if
sure,
that's how
because
folks
I'm
are
seeing
feeling.
both there, and I thought what you were saying was goal A should say this instead of what it said before.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Matt?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry, I'm confused now. Under Mercedes, what would goal A, could you just read what
Yeah, so-
her approach would be?
Yes.
Because it sounds pretty cool.
Yep, goal A would now read, instead of SHS-funded agencies and providers pay livable wage, that was the original goal A. New goal A is county contracts for SHS will fund agencies and providers and establish standards throughout the region to achieve livable wages for direct service staff. Chair Harrington?
That doesn't make sense to me. Of course, county contracts for SHS will fund agencies and providers.
Well, that is who's funding, right? So, well, I think it's specifically saying that the county contracts for SHS. So I think the will is maybe,
Yeah,
will doesn't need to be, it's county contracts for SHS, fund agencies and providers, and establish standards throughout the region. Does that make sense? Let me ask this, well, go on, Chair Harrington, and then I'm going to ask us to.
wondering if what you're getting at is through county contracts for SHS-funded agencies and providers, establish contract, are you trying to get at contracts will establish the standards that will achieve?
That's a little.
So the contracts have to have enough money in them and the standards in order to achieve the living wages. So you can set standards and say, agency A, you have to pay $26 an hour, but then you can also, and this is very real, you can also have that contract only pay $17, right?
Okay.
So the contracts have to have enough funding in them. So the contracts have to fund providers at a rate that will result in livable wages, as well as the contracts have to have standards that result in those livable wages.
Nick, I think if we nix the and, right, they will establish standards and achieve.
And
I think
achievable
the
wages.
and goes there.
Okay, so we wordsmithed to folks, I think it's good,
You wanted
right?
to establish two things. You want to establish
I
the
think that's right.
standard and make sure they achieve.
I like it.
Isn't that what you were, is that what you were trying to get at, Mercedes?
Yes, I want to make sure that there's enough money in the contracts to actually achieve the livable wages, and standards to make sure that, you know, an agency doesn't just like keep all of the money in like a random place and it doesn't end up, right? So it's got to be enough money to do it and the standards to make sure it happens.
Great, so if the language, can I ask, is the language okay as it is now? Can we get a thumbs up that folks are good with that?
I had a comment.
Christina?
I don't know if it is worth to put like county contracts for SH funded agency in a timely manner. Or like the funding also needs to come in a fashion way.
So what's the,
I think that can live in the recommendation about the contracting practices.
does it, is it captured? In the recommendations, right? Is that okay, that we have it in the recommendation language and we don't need to add it to the goal? Can we ask for a vote? Should we go back up? So we have goal A that reads now, county contracts for SHS-funded agencies and providers will establish standards throughout the region to achieve livable wages for direct service staff. Can I get a thumbs up that folks feel good about that language? Are there any major objections to this language for goal A?
So not a major objection, but Christine did bring up a point. Do we want to include contract structure in this language with our goal? Because we can talk, like Christine brought up, timeliness of payment, but along with that, there's admin rate, fee for service versus cost reimbursement. Will we pay upfront? But there's a lot of stuff that goes into that.
Does that not get into the standards? I mean, I've asked that question, like, does standards not cover that, or in the recommendations that get to some of the evaluation of contracts? Like, do those things go hand in hand if we're evaluating our contract structures and we're establishing standards throughout the region that result in that outcome? Patricia?
I can live with that.
All right, so I got, so I'm living with it. Patricia?
Yeah, that was the intent of that language that was coming out. It's like, we want to evaluate and align the practices, the contracting practices. So, and that there's a lot in there in terms of what needs to be aligned and evaluated.
Okay. Thumbs up? Any major objections? Goal B? Hopefully this one's pretty straightforward. Y'all have talked about it. It's really that the distribution of pay from lowest to highest paid staff within funded agencies, SHS-funded agencies, and providers equitable throughout the region. Chair?
What if an agency does more than just SHS? That's why I have problems with this, which is why I liked the previous goal.
Who wants to speak to that? So, I mean, many agencies are gonna have multiple funded. I think this, my sense is this is around purview, but if we took SHS funded out and just said from lowest to highest paid staff is equitable throughout the region? Jess? And then, Ebony, is that, no, Jess?
I'm comfortable with either approach. I'll just offer for the chair and others that we ask this question at an organizational level. So for the whole organization, of all organizations that received any funding from SHS this past year. So if that helps clarify that it includes the whole organization, not just the portion of the organization that is funded with SHS.
did we use that as the decision-making criteria for who we let the contracts to?
Not yet. We are just gathering that information.
Right.
Okay, Ebony?
So,
But-
I don't know. I'm uncomfortable that our risk management folks would ask about how we are using one program to enforce something in an organization that does more work than just
SHS
this
funded.
type of work.
Okay, so let's go Ebony, and then maybe we just make the edit that pulls out that just focuses on distribution of pay is equitable throughout the region. But Ebony, did you have a hand?
Yes, I was just saying that maybe possibly we couldn't go away from SHS funded language, only because this is a body for SHS. So was wondering.
I don't know. Sahan, Manta?
I was gonna say the same thing Ebony just said. I don't think we can take SHS out, or else we have no ability to achieve that goal. Like, we can only control what we can control. And also, Sharon Harrington, to your point, I hear you and I see that, and this is a conversation that we have all the time. How can I take this money if I can't do this for this other program over here? But I think that the language as is speaks to, I'm not forcing you to pay somebody more, but if you're able to pay somebody more, I will support that.
Let's go Manta.
Yeah, what you said.
So I don't know how to reconcile. Who has a hand?
Mercedes.
Oh.
Just the other thing I was gonna add on the pay from lowest to highest, we have to remember from a pay equity standpoint in organizations, lifting up lower wages causes pay compression across the whole chain. And if you lift lower people up and you leave your middle management, your supervisors the same, you're in the same situation in terms of pay equity, and it causes the same disaster across the system.
Let's go, who was it? Who had their hand up?
Sorry.
Mercedes. I can never
Yeah,
get.
so now this kind of is I didn't have this question before and I'm sorry, but so if it's at the highest and lowest paid within the funded contract or within the entire agency, even if those staff don't get paid through SHS? Like, are we just talking about the programs like the supervisor and their staff? Or are we like including the executive director whose salary can't necessarily be tracked back to SHS?
You're raising really, these are all good questions. So I wonder for the drafters of the language, Liam?
Well, I was not one of the drafters of this language, fortunately enough. And so I don't know what the original framers meant by this language. But I will say, because this language was basically pulled from the Metro Work Plan, it's required. This is a requirement as it is, and should be required through the contracts of the counties.
So with that being said, Manta?
I was just gonna say C-suite and senior staff are paid out of an admin rate in most all organizations, so there's not a direct cost going to their wages except what's already existing in their administrative rate.
So if I offer that this is the goal, that we've set some recommendations that are gonna analyze a lot of this work, are we okay landing on this goal, particularly in reference to what Liam just said, that it's already included in the work plan and should be mandated in contracts? Are folks okay moving forward with goal B? Can I get a thumbs up? Risk management responses aside, perhaps, Chair.
I think we just would have saved ourselves a lot of time if we'd had that as a
Yeah.
stated goal ahead of time.
Yeah, sorry about that. Other thoughts? Thumbs up on being okay. Nicole, you're wavering on a,
I don't know if we'd want to add the word direct service staff, if that solves that issue. Distribution of pay from lowest to highest paid direct service staff.
I think this is this language right out of the work plan. Is that what I heard you
Well,
say?
it's
Okay.
really a question for Metro and Metro Legal. They're the ones that are gonna get sued. If we get sued, we're gonna cite their language and go to court and say the purview for this case needs to be handled by Metro and not Washington County.
Well,
That is true, but the TCPB can choose whatever language it wants to establish as a goal. So it can be based off of the original work plan language. And the reason we disaggregated from the original language, because we heard from you all that we needed to really call this out. And so this was the language that we're using here for you. That said, you do have the option to amend as you've been doing this meeting.
it's Monte, is that an old card up? It's also goal language, it's not a policy at this point, right? So are folks okay with this being where we can imagine going with our recommendation supporting it? Can I get a thumbs up that goal B, as written, we're okay for today, moving forward as something that we're gonna work towards? That we have it.
The reason that I don't take issue with your asking for a vote, it's the problem of saying, well, it's just a goal, right? Because the work from this committee has to go to, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, has to go to the SHS Oversight Committee.
Yeah.
So that's why I was fine with, I liked the approach of going with the recommendations and then come back and then have just a broader goal, since we spent time to try and get agreement on what those clearer recommendations were that we wanted to effectuate. But, so that's why I'm not voting on that, because I think it doesn't work to our best advantage, that's all.
Could I put it, Matt, do you want to add something? Oh, can I ask for a thumbs up, given we know that Chair Harrington's not support, but do we have thumbs up that folks are okay with this as goal language? I'm seeing a lot of non-thumbs. Nicole?
Just a process question. What about number 1 being goal A and then goal A being goal B? Would goal number 1 cover the specifics of goal B without?
I don't know.
Just a question.
I don't know. I think to Leanne's point, I think it's in the work plan, so I'll hold that. But this is also reflective of what folks said, that, right, the folks at the front line doing the work should not be paid at the lowest level with folks that are doing administrative work getting paid exorbitant amounts, right? And I'm using language that not necessarily quoting y'all, but that was the content of the conversation. We have the folks that are doing the hardest work in our communities that are getting underpaid. And so this whole conversation is about how do you lift up that compensation for the folks that are doing some of the most difficult work in our communities? And how do you start having some equity in terms of the folks at the front line and those at the top of organizations or in management, et cetera. So that was the spirit of the conversation, I think, led to this. So that goal language is reflective of that conversation that you all had. So I'll just leave it there. I don't know if there's reflections. I look at our time. This took a lot more time than I maybe had expected. Having said that, I guess I want to hear, like, are folks okay moving forward? There was a lot of non-thumbs up. Patricia, I see your hand, so maybe add. And then I'm going to ask folks, are folks willing to remember what we've talked about and think about whether this is a goal that we're willing to try to work towards? And I appreciate your point, Chair, right? I don't want to diminish what it means to put a goal on paper, right? We're aspiring towards this and we're going to work towards it. That's the intent of this, but it doesn't bind us specifically, or maybe it does because of contract language. Well, let's go, so Liam and then Patricia and then Christina, I'll come to you.
2 points, quick point of clarity. The language is in the work plan. It's not a requirement, it's a metric. I want to clear that up for you all right now in the moment. 2.
No lawsuits, I guess. Right?
I'll just move on to Patricia.
All right.
I pulled my hand down, but that's what I was gonna say. It's a metric. And so that monitoring that and measuring that is one of the ways we look at advancing equity.
Thank you. Christina?
I just want to thank for the reminder, and that makes me think maybe we should rephrase it and say close the gap, the pay gap between lowest and highest paid staff. Because or close the gap between the ones doing the work on the ground and everybody else. Because now that I'm recalling, like I actually saw on LinkedIn recently a comment about that, where some like organizers were expressing like, look, the organizers that were doing the work are either unemployed or underpaid still, because they got tired and they were not getting paid. Like, you know, organizations and office staff were getting many times more money than they were when they were the ones like bleeding the work, or, you know, sweating the work. So I don't want to get rid of it. I think that if we make it a little bit clear, so because if we had a hard time remembering, I'm afraid it's gonna be lost, and I really wish it doesn't get lost.
I appreciate that, Christina. So we're at time, so I'm gonna maybe ask a couple things. So, and I almost don't want to say this out loud. I'm gonna ask us to vote on the concept, right? Because Christina, we don't have time to kind of move through new language. But I'm gonna ask us that in concept, do we agree that we're going in the right direction with this goal? That we're trying to address the differential pay for those at the front line, direct service, doing that work on the ground, and those at the upper levels of organization. Having said that, I wanted to agree on concept because then we can come and wordsmith at another time. But I need us to walk out of here. I think Chair Harrington challenged us in a really wonderful way. I need us to agree that this is a goal that we're aspiring toward. We might not have the right language today, but we have talked about it, and conceptually, can we agree that this idea of pay distribution and accounting for those who are doing that tough work on the ground, do we agree in spirit that this goal is going in the right direction? Is that okay to ask for today? Can I get a thumbs up that this is a goal that we do want to go towards, even if we don't have the final language today? I'm seeing lots of thumbs up there. Okay, yeah, you're neutral. All right. Well, we're at 6:00 something. Yeah, Chair?
And for everyone's benefit, the reason why I am comfortable giving thumbs up for that is I want to learn. And I want us to learn through the program. I don't know if we will be successful with reaching this goal, but I certainly would like to better understand where things are at and how do we ensure these very workers that we've talked about not being compensated appropriately for the work that they're doing, this hard work they're doing each and every day. I do want to see that lift up. And we're trying to make sure at the same time we're dealing with pay equity in ways we've never dealt with it before. So we're evolving.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we're at time. That was a labor of love that we went through together. We didn't finish a couple things on our agenda today, so I'm going to ask you all to do a little bit of homework. Our next meeting is in May. One of the topics that will be coming back, I'm sorry, Abby, this is a nice it would have been a nice coming out party for you presenting to folks, is around our meeting cadence going forward. So folks contributed to the survey, kind of landed about 50-50 in terms of monthly or bi-monthly meetings. What I'm going to ask is that you reflect on where you voted before. We're going to have a discussion and start thinking about some of the pros and cons. What are some of, my old colleagues used to say form follows function. I want to know if we're going to stay monthly, I want to know why we're staying monthly. If we're going to go bi-monthly, I want to know why you're advocating for that. So I'm going to ask you to think about that a little bit because that's going to be a question coming up. Matt?
So just an observation. I'll admit I have a very strong view myself, but let's, as we go through that, I think it's a great idea. I would encourage people to remember that we just spent 2 hours and we have not really finished the prime topic. I personally find it very difficult for a 2-hour meeting to accomplish what we need to. So my encouragement to my colleagues is that a 3-hour meeting, I think, would be far more effective. And I realize not everyone agrees with that, as evidenced by the comment, but I would encourage people to think about that, which probably means it needs to be every other month versus monthly,
Well,
for
we're
what it's
gonna-
worth.
We're going to discuss it at our next meeting. Chair Harrington?
I don't know what Matt means when he said the words, "We haven't achieved our primary goal."
I'm sorry, what I meant, we set an agenda, and we didn't make it through the agenda is what
And
I
I
meant.
can imagine as the two co-chairs, you guys are going, golly, Dave, we spent all that time putting together the agenda and we still didn't get through it. Because
Well,
I'm in that seat a lot.
I'll bet.
Appreciate that.
So I don't mean to belabor, and I don't mean to belabor it at this point, but I think we have to figure out some balance between the agenda and the amount of time. I think this has been a tremendous conversation. I'm really impressed with the insights, the commitment, the candor. I don't want us to be in a position like what we just did, where we almost made it, but we're gonna still have to do some edits. And so I just would like personally to see us have a little more time. And I think that might be a way to go. I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, Matt, so Matt's feelings are on the table. I'm going to ask you all to think about what that value is. So if, when we come back to the next meeting, we're obligated until July, right? July 1 to meet monthly. So we'll be on this cadence for the next several months, but we want to start planning out our future. So Chair Harrington, is that a new? Yeah, get that down. I want to thank you all for the extra minutes. Thanks for those that joined in person. That was the other piece of this. Appreciate y'all that joined virtually. That was a wonderful conversation. We'll see you on May 10th, and we'll develop an agenda that we'll aspire towards. With that, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Ben.
Good job, all.
May
Recording stopped.
I cannot make it to May 10, but I'll send an email.